Good evening and good morning to our audiences in the United States and China. Welcome to this webinar, Caught in the Crossfire, Student Experiences During the Downturn in U.S. China Relations. It's held jointly by the Carter Center, the U.S. China Perception Monitor, the U.S. China Heartland Institute, the China Research Center of Atlanta, and the China Global Television Network. Now, student exchanges between the United States and China were initiated after President Jimmy Carter and Vice Premier Deng Xiaoping signed a landmark agreement back in 1978. Since then, hundreds of thousands of American and Chinese students have traveled across the Pacific in pursuit of a higher education. There's no debate that these student exchanges are and will continue present a critical avenue for interaction between the American and Chinese people. But worsening relations between the US and China, magnified by the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, are threatening these people-to-people exchanges. And that's why we're here today, to discuss and explore how changes in the bilateral relationship are affecting the first and second-hand experiences of American and Chinese students studying in China and the United States, respectively. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator, Matthew Chitwood. Matthew is a freelance journalist and has worked with hundreds of students through study abroad programs in China, such as CET, CIEE, and Where There Be Dragons. He has also worked for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the U.S. State Department's Critical Language Scholarship Program. I'm your co-moderator, Kasturi Manikam. I'm a news anchor for CGTN in Beijing, presenting international news. Over my 20 years in journalism, I have been fortunate to interview some notable figures who have made political, economic, and social changes in the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you all for joining us. Now, we will first start with a 30 to 45-minute discussion moderated by Matthew. There will be a 45-minute Q&A session after. Please take the opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A box over Zoom. And with that, I would like to now hand the floor to Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Kasturi. I'm looking forward to the conversation today very much. I'm honored to be part of the conversation because I myself was a study abroad student many years ago, and it had a significant impact on me, and both personally and professionally on my worldview and my career interests. I believe there's tremendous value when we take the time to learn from one another, understand others and their perspectives, and perhaps now more than ever, as the U.S.-China relationship is at its lowest point in recent history. A friend of mine recently shared on another webinar a powerful quote that a desk is a dangerous place from which to view the world. So thankfully today, we have four impressive panelists, two from each side of the Pacific, who have chosen to get out from behind their desks and experience the US and China for themselves. We are very much looking forward to hearing your four experiences and perspectives as students, especially during this downturn in US-China relations. So it is an honor to welcome Eric, Iris, Spencer, and Zoe. Zoe Jordan received her Bachelor of Arts in Global China Studies at New York University in Shanghai in 2018. She then completed her master's degree in International Relations at the Yinqing Academy of Peking University. Spencer Reeves is an undergraduate student pursuing his Bachelor of Law in International Relations at Duke Kunshan University in China's Jiangsu province. Both Zoe and Spencer are from the US. And next, Eric and Iris are both Chinese citizens. Eric Fan received his Bachelor of Science in Statistics and Political Science from Emory University in 2020. What a year to graduate. Congratulations on that, Eric. You made it through. What a year it has been. Eric is now a master's student in computer science and journalism at Columbia University. Iris Lee is an undergraduate student pursuing her Bachelor of Arts in Sociology at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And she also studied in the U.S. during high school in Washington State. So Eric, Iris, Spencer, and Zoe, welcome to the four of you. We are thrilled to have you. Just to start it off today, and Zoe, we'll start with you. Curious, 2020 has been a very big year. Lots of transition with COVID, presidential elections, travel, study restrictions, U.S. China tensions. Share with us, if you would, how are you doing? Where are you, and what is at the top of your headspace right now?
Thanks, Matthew. That's a great question to ask all of us in 2020, is just how we're doing. First, thanks to the Carter Center and for everybody for hosting us here. It's great to be here. I'm doing well. So I live in Washington, D.C. right now. I ended up also graduating from my master's degree in this year. And so I actually left Beijing in the winter of 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So originally was planning to be there through June, unfortunately came back in January for what I thought would be a 2-week vacation, and unfortunately haven't been back since. So I first moved to China in 2014 and spent most of the time there since then in both undergrad and grad school. So it's been a while to be away, but also having kind of the space and viewing the downturn in U.S. China relations, both from the U.S. side, and then comparing that with my experiences back then has been interesting, both kind of personally and intellectually.
Thank you. Congratulations to you too on graduating in a big year. Eric, share with us, where are you based currently and what is in your headspace right now?
Thank you, Matthew. So right now I live in New York City, and for my master's program, I haven't been back to China since I graduated from Emory. I usually go back home during the summer, for at least a month, but that was made impossible this year. So I also usually go home for the Spring Festival during the winter. So this year is actually the first year that I did not go home for the Spring Festival. But overall, I'm enjoying my life here in New York. It's a big city, a lot of stuff to do. Of course, fewer things to do right now during the pandemic. But still, yeah, I'm very happy where I am.
Great, thank you, Eric. Sorry for the delay in internet connection here. Lots of videos here. Spencer, why don't you jump up next?
Thank you, Matthew. And again, thank you to the Carter Center very much for having me this evening. It's an honor to be here. Currently, I am at Duke University's campus in Durham, North Carolina. Similar to Zoe's experience, I left China in January of 2020, thinking I would be gone for a 2-week vacation. However, that 2 weeks is nearly hitting the year-long mark now. But I am very fortunate to be at Duke's campus studying what I love, which is and learning all that I can about Chinese politics from afar. So thank you very much for having me.
Great, thanks, Spencer. And Iris.
Hi, thank you, Matthew, and also thanks for the Carter Center for having me. It's an honor to be one of the panelists. I'm Iris Lee. I'm currently in Yushu, Qinghai in China. So it's the Tibetan Autonomous Zone. And I'm blessed to be able to have a job during this time of the year. And also being able to be immersed in the Tibetan community is an honor to learn a certain, to be immersed in a certain culture, I guess, in my life. And I'm also honored to have some of my Tibetan co-workers working closely with me. So yeah, the organization I work in is a nonprofit organization in China, and we work towards conserving wildlife and environment in China. So yeah, and also taking a gap semester at Emory University.
Guys, I think Matt was kicked out. Why don't you just jump in with questions?
All right. I'm afraid we've lost Matthew there. Okay. Spencer, let me begin with you. I mean, you guys spoke about your, can you tell us your experiences when bilateral relations, basically they're the lowest point. What do you hope to see under the new Biden administration?
I think as a student, I generally have not been impacted by the downturn in the bilateral relationship. However, that said, I am very optimistic that the situation will improve once we have, the right people in diplomatic positions. I think that that is probably one of the most important things, is that we just continue to try and improve the relationship, because if we can do that, then with the hard work that will be put in, it is certain that I believe it will improve.
Did you experience anything at all under the Trump administration when bilateral relations were at their lowest point?
I did not. I think as a student, compared to, and as a foreigner living in China, as an American living in China, the experience that I felt was very detached from what the rhetoric from the governments that we were hearing. People are very friendly and welcoming, regardless of where I went within the country. And I certainly did not experience any of the kind of effects of what we were hearing in the news.
Okay, Eric, let me ask you the same question. Did you experience anything at all under, during the Trump administration when bilateral relations were pretty low?
For me, I think I share most of Spencer's experience. My life here in the U.S. Has been not very much affected by the downturn of the relations. Every person I meet has been very generous. Especially in a university environment, we are very good taken care of. However, travel has been affected. Both due to COVID and also the relationship. But I think it's more due to the COVID, because as U.S. embassies get closed in China, and people find it difficult to find appointments, and especially for someone like me, when I'm transitioning from an undergrad degree to a graduate degree, my F1 visa will expire after 5 years. So I have to get a new visa for me to travel back and forth during my graduate program. That has been very difficult recently because all the U.S. embassies have closed. So, but I think that's more due to the COVID crisis compared to the diplomatic relations.
Yeah, that's true. Now, speaking of visa challenges, Iris, did you have any challenges like that at all?
Yeah, one of the reasons that I'm staying in China right now is because my visa has expired and I haven't been able to get a new one. So I've chosen to stay in China and intern. So that was one of the main reasons, is because my visa expired. Yeah. So I've seen news that since the new administration has came into office, there has also been news of reopening the embassy, and hopefully I can get my visa soon.
So Iris, same question to you as well. Did you experience anything at all when bilateral relations were low?
I think personally, the visa restriction is one, and also for non-personal secondhand experiences. My best friend growing up, who is also an international student studying in the United States, she's in Rice University. She, I think, in September, her apartment door has been sprayed. The letter "spy" on her door, because her and her roommate are both Chinese. And I think that's an indication of how the downturn in relation reflects in real life. And when she told me that, she was one of the words she used. She was saying that I couldn't believe that this will happen to me, and I couldn't believe that happened to her either.
All right, Matthew is ready again for us, and I will hand it over to him.
Thanks so much. Sorry for the technical
No
difficulties. Yeah, Iris, just to follow up on that, what a challenge to be in that situation without your visa being able to be renewed. How do you press into that issue? What's your thought process at this point and strategy, next steps?
I think I'm one of the lucky ones of who cannot go back to the States, because I have a job and I'm learning new things at my job, and I don't know, probably learning more than remote learning is doing to my life. And so some of my other friends who also have the same experience, same issue, some of them went to Singapore to get their visa, and some just have to wait. And so right now for me, I'm just waiting for the next time that I'm able to get a visa, and I'll stay in China until then. And I have no idea when, what date I will go back to the States. So that's going to be something that we'll see in the future.
Sure. Well, best of luck. Maybe to provide a little bit more context for each of us, understand our panelists, just taking a step back. If you wouldn't mind sharing with us why you decided to study abroad in the first place, and how did you decide on your program? And yeah, Zoe, do you mind starting for us?
Sure, I can start off. So I did both my undergrad and graduate degree in China. I was 18, so my decision-making process at that time was less developed than it would have been now. I had a lot of people stay. I'm from the state of Maryland, which was, a popular area, but I think I just wanted to go far. I'd studied a little bit of Chinese in high school, and then, which I'm sure is a familiar experience to many of the foreigners in China. Once you kind of go there, you get hooked, stay for a while. And because I studied Chinese politics and history, it was natural to kind of stay on. But so decided at first to go to the U.S. institution in China, and then for graduate school to be at a fully Chinese institution.
Great, thank you. Spencer, how about you on your side?
I was really interested in pursuing Chinese language education when I was for my undergraduate degree. And when I was selecting between schools, I was very particular about, I had a certain temperature range I wanted it to be. And when this opportunity at Duke Kunshan came available, I'm in the inaugural undergraduate class, so it's a rather new joint venture university. And when it came available, I got accepted. I went over there for a weekend to China and met some of my fellow classmates. And when I saw the city of Kunshan, I really realized that, this is the kind of place that I want to continue my education. And I knew that I would be able to learn lots of Chinese while I was there. So still learning, but it's been really good so far.
Good. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that program. How does that work in terms of cross-cultural collaboration?
Sure. So it's a joint venture university between Duke in Durham, North Carolina, and then Wuhan University. So they had graduate programs which started, I believe, around like 2015 or something like that. And then the undergraduate program, or it may have been earlier, the undergraduate program started in 2018, and it's a full degree granting program from, you get a Chinese degree from Duke Kunshan and then an American degree accredited by Duke. So we are continuously adding students to our program. We actually just completed our international admissions. The deadline has just passed for that. And we found out that our applications had doubled compared to the number of students who had applied last year.
Interesting. And one might think otherwise, given the downturn. Why do you think the reason for that was?
I think that it was very interesting because, I think that, again, as some of us have already said, right, that we as students in these countries don't necessarily experience the direct effects of the political rhetoric, and the fact that people are still very interested in learning about Chinese culture and American culture. So I think that is a large part due to it.
Great. And Zoe, let's actually jump back quickly to you. If you wouldn't mind summarizing really quick your programs, because those are actually quite unique and different programs as well. Tell us a little bit about NYU Shanghai and Yinqing.
Sure. So NYU Shanghai is, well, it has probably changed since I left, but when I was there, we had about 300 people per class. We're half Chinese, half international. About half of the international student body is American. 4-year undergraduate joint degree between New York University, and we're paired with East China Normal University in Shanghai. And in that school, people can take programs anything from computer science to biology to China studies. You don't need to just be studying China while you're there. The graduate program, Yanqing Academy, is we're about a third or less American international program within Beida. It's a graduate program, and there everybody gets a master's in China studies, but you can concentrate in different things. It's also a fully funded program, which is nice for a graduate school option.
Great. And Beida being Beijing University or Peking University, of course. Iris, tell us a little bit more about your programs.
Well, I studied 4 years in the States for high school before coming to Emory. So my choice for high school was basically my dad has a really good friend in Washington. So that was not really my decision of the place I go, because I was 14 at the time when I came into the States. For right now, I'm studying I'm studying philosophy and also double majoring in sociology and religion. So yeah, I applied early decision to Emory University, and fortunately got in. So yeah, I'm still an undergrad student.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Eric.
So when I was a freshman at Emory, I really had no idea what I was going to study. So I tried a lot of different classes during my first semester. I tried psychology, I tried sociology, I tried political science, I tried math and computer science, everything. And I took this one political science class that really hooked me in. And I really found that I enjoyed reading about philosophy and politics, and I enjoyed writing about them. So that's how I got into studying political science. And later, I picked up statistics because the program was very quantitative, and it was really beneficial for me from a research point of view. And then I participated in a journalism program when I was senior. It was a 1-year collaborative program for Georgia News Lab, and we did investigative stories, and I really enjoyed that. And I came to Columbia to kind of pursue a journalism route even further. So
fantastic. And you shared with me prior your experience investigating that election. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit more of that experience? And then curious to hear other participants here. Study abroad, obviously, part of the benefit of that is learning from others, experiencing across cultures. Curious if the other panelists have had similar formative aha moments or things that have challenged them in the new cultural setting. So Eric, share a little bit more, if you would, about that investigative experience.
Yeah, of course. So when I first joined the student journalism group, I really had no idea. I always liked reading news. Especially since high school, I love reading English language news. But I really had no idea how to be a journalist, especially how to initiate a conversation with someone you don't know. But I was really surprised that when I make phone calls to local election officials, when we were covering local elections in Georgia, they were really receptive to journalists. They answered questions, and they were very direct with you, right? If they don't know something, they will tell you. If they direct you to someone else, they will do it. So that was a very eye-opening experience because that was, as everyone knows, it's a level of openness and openness to journalism that I've not experienced before. So that was really eye-opening for me, and that kind of consolidated my my path forward. Right, I really decided to pursue journalism because that experience really, encouraged me that this is a very valuable thing to do going forward.
A quick follow-up on that. I'm curious, a journalism, interesting field. What does that look like, navigating that for you, moving ahead, whether being in the U.S. or a journalism career back in China?
So for me, I really started as a data specialist because I studied statistics. It was very rare in the newsroom to have someone who knows coding and programming to help them deal with a lot of databases, scraping the internet, etc. But then when I got into the investigative part, I found that I really enjoyed the reporting as well. I really enjoyed talking to people. I really enjoyed writing news articles. I think it's a great, it's a great opportunity for me. I'm very lucky that I had this experience interviewing people and writing articles here in the U.S. I have not thought about moving back to China. I don't have much experience doing that in China, so we will see in the future. But I think for the time being, my plan is to do journalism in the U.S.
Great, thank you. Zoe, how about for you? As you think back in your time in China, any formative aha moments as you encountered the culture there?
Sure. I think the most formative period of time for me was definitely my first year or so there. I think moving to a different country when you're younger and when you're just starting college tends to be a very formative time for most people. But only kind of learning how to become an adult as a college student, but also doing that in another country, I think was very valuable for me to kind of grow into my own personality, but also to step back and then look at my own country from this new perspective, right? So it wasn't just about learning about China from within China. It was also about being in China and then looking back and understanding, what my own country was and the types of political changes that we were going through as well. So that would definitely be my most formative kind of period of time.
That's great. Share with us, if you would, what were some of those takeaways as you looked back on the U.S. from a different perspective?
Takeaways, I think a lot of the discussions that my friends would have in the U.S. about like culture or politics, race, all of that, I think it was just useful to not simply contextualize that within the US context, but then also put that into a larger global context, right? So in our school, many of our friends weren't just Asian Americans, right? Like you wouldn't just be Chinese American, you could be Chinese American or Chinese American. And those are three distinct identities. And that means types of conversations we would have about cultural appropriation, racism in these different countries, which, this exists everywhere, we would kind of step out from that one context and view it in a larger context. And I think that was just something valuable that now, even after college in the working world, I try to still think about and apply.
Was there anything as you went to China that surprised you that you weren't expecting China to be that way? New perspectives on your host country there?
I mean, I was surprised by everything every day, right? That's the fun part about living abroad is these little moments on the street are surprising. So the most surprising things are now that I can't sit back and think, but you're walking down the street and you're just like, why are these people burning paper on the side of the street today? Or is today a holiday? Things like that. So I guess I would just say that one kind of larger takeaway is I think sometimes people are surprised. People from the US could be surprised when they go to China and they see Chinese people, saying things that we don't agree with or might seem nationalistic and different. And we're quite surprised that our Chinese friends aren't like waiting in their virtual bread lines for their like freedom for us to give that to them on a plate. So I think learning to kind of respect people's individual opinions, which may have seemed, surprising to me as an American and like my thoughts on all of these like larger issues. But I think it was good to kind of understand why people had opinions that differed from my own, even if they were surprising.
Yeah, thank you. Same question to you, Spencer. Formative moment as you have engaged in study abroad like this?
I think one of the biggest moments for me was actually one that was similar to Zoe's, is having been outside of the United States and being able to take a look back at our country as and sort of the political situations there. Because when you're in the US, there's you're always caught up in the news cycle, and you're always around people that sort of maybe think one way or another, and it's generally the same. There's a homogeneity to it. Whereas when I have been in China and among my classmates, everyone thinks very differently, and all of us are still, our opinions are still, we're very malleable in the sense that as we learn about these topics, our opinions change, and we sort of have this discourse as we're coming to a mutual center point of what are we learning about. We're learning about one culture, we're learning about another at the same time. And I think that was fascinating to me, because especially in, as an American growing up in a public school system, I think that public school can tend to be, or schooling in America can tend to have a certain political leaning. And I really appreciated, not having politics be the entire center of my life, but also, still learn about them in a way that I can continue to develop those thoughts from my own. So,
is there a specific takeaway or perspective that you were challenged by?
I don't think that there was any one in particular, but especially in 2018, that was the midterm elections, the fall of my freshman year. It was very interesting to see how engaged lots of my friends who were not from the US were on that topic. My friends from other international countries, friends from China. And so sort of the discourse around that changing, if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. And Iris, what's your experience been? Any formative experiences through high school or university here?
I think one of the moments I keep thinking back to is, I think a year ago when I was on this Uber, on this Lyft to a karaoke place with to go celebrate with my friend. I was talking, the driver was Black American, and was a Black American guy. And we had a great conversation talking about how music differs through cultures between US and China. It was very inspiring conversation. And at the end of the drive, he told me, you know what, at the end of the day, we all came from Africa. And at the end of the day, we're all brothers and sisters from different parts of the world. And so he said, so have a great night, my beautiful sister. And I left the Uber saying, have a beautiful night, my beautiful brother. And it was great that I think it was America that a lot of us imagine or hope or wish to be. But in fact, the reality is not. And I think back to that a lot because I think that's I think he presents a very hopeful future for, or an idea that we all hope America to be. And that is something that I learn from time to time living in the States about issues I have not thought deeply before. I think the first time I heard about race, the race issue in the States was when it was in 2008, and I was in primary school, and my school broadcast said the first Black American president was initiated in the States today, but that doesn't mean the race issue is solved in the States. And I remember I was puzzled at the time. I didn't know what the race issue is, what racism is, and also what that would mean in life. And I think I learned the good and bad in the States. I learned there are people who are hopeful for the future. I got to know people who are intellectuals, who are brilliant people, who are kind people, but also got to see what the other countries' issues are. And I thought deeply about how to change those and also compare to issues back home. So I think my study abroad experience has really enriched my life and also broadened my work wheels and also thought.
Great, thank you so much. Curious, in similar way that Zoe and Spencer shared, looking back on their own countries and how their experience in their host country enriched perspectives back on their home country. What were some of your takeaways, Iris, as you look back to China? Iris, can you hear me? There we go.
Oh, sorry, my Wi-Fi was a bit unstable. Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah. Yes, of course. Curious what your experience has been looking back on China. Your enriched perspective through the U.S., but translating back as you look back to China. What are some of the takeaways?
I think 2020 has really been a wild trip for me, learning about politics between U.S. and China. I think part of it starts with COVID starting. Also watching COVID starts in China, and also knowing how a lot of my friends and family are in lockdown with this virus this unknown virus was really stressful, and also really caused me to think a lot about Chinese politics. But the thing is, I think it took me there are periods of time that I have different views because I get different information. I have ventured through the YouTube, and also Twitter, and also WeChat informations to comprehend better about situations in China. But I think through my months of learning about Chinese politics, I think I'm rather new to this field compared to the other panelists. I think I realized that I cannot use the Western perspective to see China. That is interesting, having two worldviews, having two different ways to see the world in my head, and they don't really collaborate that well. It's either I try to, I don't know, I still try to iterate how this impacts me, and also how this impacts my worldview. I guess I'm still learning through how I see China and how I see U.S. respectively.
Yeah, that's challenging. As you have conversations, Iris, with classmates, so for example, fellow Chinese classmates who are studying abroad as well in the U.S., I'm curious how those similar, or do those differ from your classmates who are either international students or U.S. students studying in the U.S.?
I think it's interesting how students assume other people's political intentions, I guess, because I remember I was taking one of the Chinese professor's classes, and I was talking to one of the Chinese international students, and one of the questions he asked me was, "Is the professor anti-China?" But I don't think that. I think my U.S. professor, my U.S. classmates, they assume that professors are maybe at this time anti-China. I think that's very different assumptions. The Chinese students assume that perhaps all Chinese professors of nationality or ethnicity will lean towards their answers about more pro-China, while the other professors might be more anti-China. And I think that's interesting, how to assume just political intentions right off, I guess.
How about for you, Eric? Same question. I guess same two questions. One, new perspectives for you looking back on your own country, China, and then the difference in conversations with whether your classmates are Chinese classmates or U.S. classmates.
Okay, so let me talk about my impression of my American friends. I think most of them know very little about China or about Asia, about other countries in general. So they are not particular. Most people in the U.S. are not particularly interested in foreign affairs, and you can see that in the polls, right? No politician can get elected based on foreign policy, right? People don't care. But when I talk to them, right, people are curious and they get some information from the media, and they hear some stories about, maybe Hong Kong or whatever, and they have they tend to have a very naive view on a lot of issues. And when you explain to them, they realize, oh, there's so much history behind everything, and there's so much complications behind every issue. So that was my general impression, that most Americans are not particularly interested in national affairs. But there are those, including Zoe and Spencer, and that are very much experts in this field. So it's different, and that's different from my Chinese friends, right? I feel like almost all my friends in China, and also my Chinese international students here, they care to some degree about China-U.S. relations. They care to some degree about U.S. politics. And I think if you ask anyone in China, they know something about the U.S. They know something about U.S. politics. So I think that's a big difference. And that makes my life a little bit harder, because my parents and all my friends in China, they would follow the news about U.S. politics on WeChat and on Weibo or whatever, and they will ask me questions all the time, right? And they will see there's a protest in New York, and they know I live in New York, and they will quiz me, right? What's happening in New York today, right? Are you all right? Is there a riot? But of course, those kind of news are often amplified, in China. Protests happen in the U.S. every day. Very few of them turn into riots. But still, my parents are very worried, and I have to explain to them, 99% are peaceful people. Just they're not trying to hurt me.
Yeah, parents are an important part of the study abroad mechanism. Most parents are the financiers of that, and so they're an important, certainly, player in making that happen. Curious for Eric and Iris, as you talk to your classmates, as study abroad is shifting, there's over 350,000 Chinese students who were studying in the US in 2019, 2020. That's a lot, but it seems like the trend is going down. Those numbers are dropping in part because of the downturn in relations. Iris, your experience with visa restrictions, challenges like that. So as you're talking to your parents, as you're talking to your classmates, are the things that they're saying and expressing, are those lining up with this rhetoric of tightening restrictions and declining interest in studying in the US?
I think so. I've talked to some of my friends who graduated, who are graduating soon. When they're thinking about graduate schools, they're considering other countries rather than the States, because it's more, it feels very uncertain what we experienced in 2020. It feels like, with the visa restrictions, and also in July, last year, July, we had the F1 visa restriction thing. That was also very unpredictable. And I think that many of the concerns is that people don't want to go through those stress. It seems like there are also other good options of countries who seem to have less turbulences in terms of those legal restrictions. And also my parents, when they were talking about graduate school with me, they also asked me if I consider other countries to study. And I said, from my perspectives, I wanted to continue to study abroad. I wanted to complete graduate school in perhaps a foreign country. But honestly, I think most Chinese students are similar to me, that we don't really care which country. perhaps the first option is the United States. If that doesn't work out, to us, it seems like there are also other good options too.
How about you, Eric?
For me, the downtown relations doesn't actually affect my personal planning that much. You know, I always wanted to study in the U.S. and I know that there are very good programs in the U.S. that I'm particularly interested in. For example, this Columbia program. So that didn't actually factor into my decision that much. And what's the other part of the question?
No, that was great. That's perfect.
Okay,
thank
cool.
you. Zoe and Spencer, flipping that on its head, the Wall Street Journal recently came out with an article saying that interest in China was cooling, numbers down. As you talk to classmates, colleagues, what is the sense? Do you sense that there is declining interest or fear on that end of things?
Yeah, I can start to answer that. I mean, I think Eric's point earlier about, not a whole lot of people in the US knowing about China is a good one, right? And like the main reason why we should have more people able to go there. And so I think the problem has two elements. One is interest and the other is access, right? And I think that it's no surprise and not something new that it is becoming harder for foreigners to live in China. And being a student is one of the, only options now to actually like live there and work there. So I think one problem is the kind of institutional constraints that are largely driven by a decline in Sino-American relations. And then there's the individual decision about how you want to navigate those constraints and kind of what you're willing to sacrifice to live there. And I think that on the one hand, there are very good reasons why American citizens might not want to, go to China, take money from a Chinese institution because of the effect that might have on their job opportunities coming back to the US. And that's an unfortunate reality, but I think that that's something that like students have to navigate as individuals that exists within these institutional constraints. So I think that it is a shame that there are this like larger culture and these larger problems, but it's hard then to, and this kind of goes back to what Iris was saying earlier about her professor, having people be for or anti-China, right? Because a student's role isn't to be either of those things. We're supposed to go there and then we learn things and we take that back. And so it's a shame when these institutional constraints then put students in that relation or in that position where, maybe a business student feels comfortable going and being at a Chinese institution, but a graduate student studying politics or security has to think more about what types of like censorship constraints or things that we're willing to put in order to have access to our research.
Right, that's great. Thanks, Zoe. How about you, Spencer? Thoughts?
It's interesting because I think, yes, on the one hand, there is the general decline in interest, but at the same time, it's juxtaposed against what I said before about how my program in particular, we have received double the amount of applications we received in the year prior. And so, it shows that I think that there is hope, that people are still interested, at least this is for the undergraduate level, in kind of coming to China and seeing what the country is all about. Because, even amid all this political rhetoric back and forth, that there is still lots to learn and a lot of potential.
What do you think needs to happen to foster that environment a little bit?
What kind of environment?
To encourage more students to study abroad, study in China, or invite Chinese students to the US to study?
Well, I think perhaps in the immediate short term, just making visa access easier on both ends, because for Chinese students to come into the US and for American students to come into China, especially currently, it's a little bit challenging. And once people are able to actually get to the countries where they are going to study, then of course others will want to follow. I think otherwise, like having I guess institutions that can sort of find ways to just market themselves in a way that is, that is welcoming and ensures that people will be able to have conversations about sort of tough topics without having to worry about any sort of fear of repercussion against them and that sort of thing.
Very important. Wonderful. Well, I see lots of questions coming in. One last question from me to all of our panelists, and then I'll turn it back to Kasturi for Q&A from the audience. As I'm asking this, feel free, audience, if you have had questions come to mind, enter those in the chat box, and we'll present those to the panelists here in a moment. What would you say to your classmates who are considering studying abroad, whether in the U.S. or China? And maybe they're thinking twice about that currently, given the downturn in relations. What would you say to them? Let's start with Eric.
Well, I would say to my friends in China, you should still come. I think the current chaos and back and forth, both internally in the U.S. and also internationally between China and U.S., they are temporary. They're not going to be permanent. And I think still you can learn a lot by studying the U.S. It's a very different society. It's a very different system, and you will understand that a lot of things that you read online are not as accurate, and you will only have to experience yourself to find out. And I think, especially the misinformation, disinformation, both in the US and in China, for different purposes, but they tend to profit, people profit off confrontation, they profit off anger, and they profit off conflicts. And I think I would encourage people to realize that normal people still live their lives, and normal people still love each other on the street. And what you see online are not representative of the real world. So I think people should still travel to each other's places and see for themselves.
Thanks for that, Eric. Great perspective. Zoe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say do it similar to Eric. I think that there are very legitimate reasons to criticize both sides and to have problems and make your decision based on that. But secondly, I think it's equally important. There are equally legitimate imperatives for going there and studying in person. So study abroad, it's very formative and useful, but also be deliberate in why you want to go and what you hope to get out of it. And that'll differ per person.
Great. Thanks, Zoe. Iris, what do you think? What would you tell a friend considering studying abroad?
I would say, I also say do it. I think studying abroad experience always change a person's life. And I would say take an open mind to care more about facts rather than narratives, to learn about what are things that are factually true rather than what are the argumentations or the argumentations of the both sides. That's how you get a much calmer view of the world, I guess.
Thanks, Iris. And Spencer?
I think similar to what my friends have said, just to do it, and that chances are once you get there, what you experience will be very different from what you might have seen or heard on the internet. But I think that you will find that all those your experiences will be much better in person than what you have heard before.
Very good. Very rich experiences, good perspective. Kasturi, I'm going to turn it back over to you here for the Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. We'll take questions from the audience now. Now, first up, this is generally to everyone, the four of you. Do you think the current visa and travel restrictions will affect the educational exchanges in the future? Zoe, you want to start first?
Do I think visa restrictions will change?
Yeah, affect educational exchanges in the future.
Yeah, I think by definition, tightening visas would change the amount of people that could go to each place, and that's quite a shame. But again, I think that just goes back to this idea that when we talk about the topic of the panel, when we talk about bilateral relations and how that affects the individual experience, it comes down to looking at what the structural level constraints are, which as students, we don't have quite agency over that. We're affected by that, right? And then looking at how people such as us can navigate that and still have, really useful, good, fulfilling exchanges.
Spencer, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think I could have put it any better than Zoe. It's obviously it does hurt in the short term for people not to be able to, once all those restrictions are still in place, and hopefully that as things change and improve, that they will be lifted. But yeah, I think what Zoe said was very well spoken.
Eric?
Yeah, I think in the short term, visa restrictions, especially the closure of U.S. embassies in China, have really affected, the travel of Chinese students back and forth. And, I still don't know if I'm able to go back to China the next summer, even after COVID. So yeah, I really wish that those restrictions can be relaxed, and I really wish that the embassies can reopen.
Iris, your thoughts on that?
Similar to Eric. And yeah, it's also very uncertain for me, looking at the future of when I can go back to the States, depending on when I can get a visa. And also, I think the restrictions of international students also have more implications, even in classrooms. Because when I was taking remote classes last semester at Emory, I was trying to take below the minimum of 12 credits because I was also working full-time. But it's impossible because of the immigration status. The school has realized that people want to take less classes, lesser than 12. So they relax that to all students, that people can take below 12 credits this semester, this upcoming semester, but it's not relaxed to international students. So we can still remain the immigration status. And I think that's also a huge toll on how people plan their lives and how much stress that will mean for them for taking above 12 credits during remote classes.
Okay, I've got another question for all of you guys as well. How do you evaluate the media's role in shaping the opinions of your peers and their own perceptions of U.S. China relations? Zoe, you wanted to take this question first?
Sure, thank you. I think that's a great question to bring up the role of the media. I think for the four of us on this panel I think that our opinions kind of have skewed different than the general population because we've cared about these issues for a while, right? Like both Spencer and I have been in China thinking about it for a while, and both Iris and Eric have been in the US following it for a while. So we're probably not the best barometer of the general population, but I think it's still important to look at how our opinions have changed over time relative to maybe our friends and family who haven't studied it. So on the US side, I think that the fact that U.S. China relations is kind of at the forefront of the national psyche has been different. And I think Iris's point before is good, which is it tends to be this either for and against binary decision. And for people like us, hopefully we can add a little bit of nuance to that. Thank you.
All right, Spencer, jump in.
Yeah, I think the media has a very significant role in kind of determining how people view U.S. China relations. And we get this question a lot. I get it from family, and I get it from friends at home. What is the actual situation? Because with all the misinformation and disinformation, especially in the United States right now, no one really knows what to believe. And I think social media too plays a big role, right? We've seen these sort of social media algorithms that perpetuate certain perspectives on things. And so, yeah, I think that it's that this kind of perpetual bias towards one way or another, again, that either or is a big issue. But the four of us, as Zoe pointed out, right, we kind of have a different perspective, and that we sort of the importance of reading both or all sides of the story rather than just following one narrative on what the situation might be.
Iris?
I think Also, from my perspective, seeing how misinformation spreads, I don't know. I tend to think that you should trust the media largely, but also have your own system of evaluations of seeing what's the point they're coming from, and also what's the purpose they're trying to achieve. And I think the only way to navigate in a time that there are so many different narratives is that you read a lot of different sources and you think deeply about them. That's how we can confront misinformation and also trying to get the factual things from different sources.
Eric.
As someone studying journalism right now, I'm very sensitive to the media issue. And it was really unfortunate that, the past few years we've seen U.S. journalists being expelled from China and Chinese journalists in the U.S. being, expelled by the U.S. government. So that's really unfortunate. I think whatever your opinion is, we should always welcome people to especially journalists, to go to the each other's countries and report on the ground, right? Because whatever biases you have, journalists on the ground can provide the most accurate, most in-time information for people at home. And without them, everything online you see are second-handed, right? And those second-handed information, usually they profit off conflicts and they want to generate as much anger as possible for you to click on. So I think in general, my hope is that both countries can be more open to media and journalists abroad. And that way, people can really get firsthand information back home. Yeah.
So Spencer, this is directed to you. Would you be able to expand about the doubling of applicants to your program? Are they mostly students from the US and China or elsewhere?
Sure. So that doubling in applications are from international students. So the majority of them come from the United States, maybe about perhaps half of them. I'm not sure the exact statistics, but a number of others come from countries all around the world. The students from China apply through the typical Chinese university application track. So they'll take the Gaokao sometime in June and then to the university through that. So that doubling is not including our Chinese student population.
All right. Now, this is one of my favorite questions, actually. Eric said that he found that most Americans he has met are not interested in China. Iris said one of her most memorable encounters in the US was with a Black taxi driver. So basically the question, to summarize it, what do all of you hope to see under the new Biden administration? How to improve bilateral relations, and what would you like to see under the new Biden administration? You want to start first, or anyone can jump in?
Sure, I can start first. Thank you. At the political level, stability would definitely be top of my list. I mean, I think for individuals who, want to travel to and from these countries, that's the most important thing. But I think kind of as the question is discussing about kind of like cultural exchanges, I think a reinvestment in culture, in sports, in global health, in, individual level exchanges outside of the strict politics and security sphere is super important. I mean, we've seen historically that a lot of these connections do come up from sports, be it like ping pong in the 70s or the arts and culture music scene now. So I would definitely say a investment in arts and the like.
Okay. What about Spencer?
I think also ensuring that sort of the diplomatic strategy is one that's unified, and with the people leading that have had experience with China before, that they're not sort of new to the arena. And then also just, again, kind of the like sort of pushing people to experience both countries, which generally will come with the stabilization, I guess, of the relationship. They go hand in hand. But just, making it easier for people to travel back and forth between the US and China. And as that accessibility grows, I think things will perhaps stabilize.
Eric?
I agree with Zoe and Spencer, but I also want to add that rhetoric does matter. As Biden repeatedly said during the campaign, that the president's word matters, and I feel like the general atmosphere and general this feeling of conflict really comes from the previous administration. The rhetoric against China and everything about China is bad. And Chinese students are bad, and Chinese journalists are bad, and the COVID is a China virus, etc. So I think that the rhetoric does matter, and that's what regular people on the street hear. They don't understand, sophisticated international relations. They don't understand foreign policy, but they know what their leaders are saying. So I think my hope is that the incoming administration. And also, both countries. I think I hope to see an ease of rhetoric. I hope to see that coming back into normal diplomatic rhetoric instead of this rhetoric of conflicts and anger and confrontation.
Iris, would you like to add to that?
I think my biggest hope is that the COVID situation can be calmed soon. Also because my life has been deeply intertwined with a lot of Americans, and I would like to see them being less stressful about the COVID situation. And I think that's my biggest hope.
All right. Another question for you guys, for all of you. A recent study found that young people in America are having a more favorable view towards China now. Do you think this is accurate? Iris, you want to start first?
Wait, favorable?
Have a favorable opinion towards China now, Americans. Do you think that that's an accurate statement?
So more I'm just trying to make sure that I'm hearing this right. More positive?
Yes, more positive. Yep.
I'm a bit surprised, as you can see that I asked 2 questions to confirm, because I see a lot of my friends posting on Instagram and also Twitter to raise awareness about China, about China-related issues. I would think that there's more hostility, but I'm not sure because I only know a few people, and I don't have comprehensive observation to give an accurate
That's fair enough. Sure. Eric, what about you?
So the question is, younger people are more positive about China compared to older people?
Yes, younger Americans, a recent study has found younger Americans are more positive, have a positive opinion about China now. Do you think that's accurate?
I haven't seen the study, but I feel like in general, the public opinion has been more negative in general. But I can imagine that maybe that has been even more negative for older folks than the younger people. There are a lot of popular, TikTok, for example. It's a Chinese app. It's very popular among young people in the U.S. and also anti-China being a Trump brand. I think that plays into the fact that young people in the U.S. in general are less favorable of Trump and Republican Party in general compared to the older population. So I think those factors might have played into that, but I haven't seen the numbers myself. In general, my feeling is that the view toward China has been more negative in general.
What about Spencer? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't really have anything much to add to what Iris and Eric said. I think I'd be interested to see the study kind of to interpret it for myself, because it's definitely interesting if younger people do, in fact, have more favorable views towards China. I'd be curious what are the driving factors towards that.
All right, Zoe?
Same as everybody else has said here. I haven't seen similar public opinion polls that have reflected that opinion, so it would be interesting to see the study.
All right. Okay, Eric and Iris, how do you evaluate the greater scrutiny towards Chinese professors due to their connections to China. Do Chinese students also feel this scrutiny from the school or government? This is directed to Eric and Iris.
Yeah, sure. I can take it first. When I was at Emory, I remember there were a couple Emory professors that are ethnic Chinese got investigated, got fired because of their connections or their friends from Chinese universities. I don't know the details about those stories, but I did remember that those stories caused some concerns among Chinese students, and those news were very damaging to prospective students in China who are looking for study at Emory University. But in general, I feel like for students that's less of a concern than professors, right? Because we don't take money, we give money to U.S. universities. So within the college environment, we are not as affected. But I'm sure that if we want to pursue a academic career in the future, that's something we have to be aware of.
Iris?
I think it's worrisome to hear about those news during the time when the Emory professors were were given allegations of their for their connections to Emory to Chinese universities. I was on an Emory trip, summer trip, with a bunch of people, and one of them was an Emory professor who was Chinese, and I asked about his opinion, and he said he's very stressed about it. He's very worried about how that's going to develop, and I think that's generally the how we see it, because we do hope that I don't know we do hope that a lot of things can be examined more closely before they give allegations towards the professors. And I think also if you look into the details, many of them seems also worrisome. When the Emory professor was given allegations, I think they shut down the entire lab, I think, including the data of the graduate students have been working at. And I think there's also a lot of damage to the students. And it seems like how they act on those professors are very, I don't know, they don't seem to have that much factual grounds and before they actually do things to the professors. And I'm not surprised by it, because living in China, a lot of things are worked out that way. But I don't think I've seen something that abrupt being done in the States, and I think that's worrisome.
Spencer and Zoe, I just want to jump in a bit. Did you face any sort of discrimination at all?
I think first of all, white privilege is something that exists in the U.S. and abroad, especially like both of us are white Americans in China. That certainly changes our experience versus Americans of different races and ethnicities. I think there's kind of, if you live and study and work in the US for a certain amount of time, like you can become an American. That path isn't viable for foreigners in China. And so the extent to which we can integrate ourselves in that community has an inherent limit. And I don't think that that's the goal for most foreigners going to China, at least in my experiences, is because we want to like integrate in that culture, which is important because we are not. So definitely heard, anti-American sentiment from various people, but nothing that had kind of made me want to leave China or that was unexpected or anything like that.
What about you, Spencer?
I've had very similar experiences. People have been generally very welcoming, sort of detached from the government level rhetoric. But again, the same point that as an American or someone who does not look Chinese, I'll always be a foreigner within China, and sort of how in the future, what does that mean for if I want to live in China and work there? I will still be a foreigner in that country. So sort of not generally discrimination in a sense, but at the same time, there is sort of a differentiation between someone who's native and someone who's not.
So Eric, this question is for you. You live in New York. Have you experienced discrimination at the university because the fact that you're Chinese? Was it virus related due to the COVID-19?
No, not really. I haven't experienced any discrimination. At Emory and also at Columbia. I don't think that was an issue within college. I think especially on campus, it's everyone is very very nice to each other. No, I haven't experienced any.
Okay, and this question is directed to all of you. Did you guys face any sort of pressure or comments from your immediate peers at all? Zoe, you want to start first?
Sure. Do you mind clarifying just pressure in what way?
Just comments related to COVID-19, the fact that, you're studying in China or anything at all. Negative comments from your peers at all. Did you receive any while you were in China?
Well, when I was in China, I think people were worried for my safety as the news, coming out of Wuhan at that time, I wasn't anywhere near it. But I think that, because the news hit there first, people were worried. And then when I came to the US, sure, there were jokes about me bringing it over to the US by friends. I considered those lighthearted. So my large answer would be no, I hadn't had any pressure outside of, general concern for my safety.
Okay. Spencer?
I have never experienced any sort of negative comments from my peers or family about my time in China.
Okay. Eric and Iris?
No, not really. Except the reality that we have visa restrictions and we have to stay at home all the time. But aside from those, there's not external pressure from others.
So Iris, did you face any at all from your peers?
I don't think so, but I think I take some precautions. Looking back, I think during the months from January to March, I don't think I was really stressed. I was really stressed about how people would think about seeing an Asian coughing or sneezing. So instead, I have never coughed or sneezed in public or in the presence of other people for a whole month, because I was afraid of how people will have negative comments. But in reality, I have never experienced anything of that sort.
All right, this is directed to Spencer and Zoe. Similar to Chinese professors in the United States, there's also increased scrutiny of American and foreign professors in China. Did you feel the scrutiny as American students in China? How did it influence or affect your studies?
At my university, I've never felt any of this sort of influence to sort of censor what I'm saying. We have adopted a system that we sort of just say whatever we want, and then what's said in the classroom stays in the classroom. And, when we're talking about it among friends, we can say, oh, we talked about this, but we're not going to attribute it to any one person. So everyone can feel sort of safe about what they're saying. So yes, as a student in my program, I've never felt that I've had to sort of protect what I say or not say certain things.
And what about you, Zoe?
Yeah, I think expanding off Spencer's point, maybe this question is evoking two different types of pressure. One, which is what happens when you're in China and the types of things that you can say and do. And the second might be pressure about how you're perceived back in the US. I think there's certainly larger skepticism of Americans who choose to, for example, take money from a Chinese institution or spend a lot of time there. And, whether that is like a tacit endorsement of the types of government policies, I think is debatable. And I think there are good reasons for studying there. But I do think that skepticism exists. And then in terms of people's individual decisions on the types of self-censorship or the types of choices they'll make, what they can and can't study, similar to Spencer, my experiences have been broadly the same. I've never put myself in a position where I feel like I was compromising the integrity of my work or the the work of my peers. But I do think that an environment where what you're doing, where you're going, who you're taking money from is all under increased scrutiny.
Okay. Now, this is directed to all of you. How can universities, I mean, based on your experiences as well, how can universities help students better handle unforeseen circumstances like COVID-19? Iris?
I think one of the things that universities can do is to provide more, more comforting, because I feel like when it's stressful, when we're all trying to figure out what's next, I think it's important that you look into students' mental health, that you calm them down, that you tell them that we'll try everything we can, we'll try our best. And that's something that I don't think Emory did well. I think last July when the F1 restriction came out, because when the students are when unprecedented situations happen, I'm speaking for the Chinese students in the United States. We're stressful about situations ourselves, but also being the only child, we're the only child generation. We also face tremendous stress from family members, talking about how this is going to play out, how the future is going to look like. So that's also a lot of stress coming from there. And I think it will be very helpful if the United States universities put students' mental health at first. That will be something that will help a lot.
Eric, what about you?
I think the best thing the university can do is to provide flexibility and choices for international students. I think for a lot of programs, they have rules, they have the ways to do business, but I feel like for international students, it's often impossible to choose. And when situations like COVID or visa restrictions happen, I just wanted to have more options, right? And in terms of selecting classes, in terms of deadlines, and there are also time zone differences, right? A lot of people are taking remote classes in China. They have 12 hours time differences. So when schools are offering classes and when they are setting up office hours, I just hope that professors and administrators and universities can be more flexible.
Spencer?
Yes, I think the same thing can be said from my perspective, the flexibility and sort of just attention to the well-being, because not only do a lot of people have sort of this increased pressure of time zone differences, but also perhaps at their home countries, they might have also certain responsibilities at home, such as helping to care for their siblings or helping to cook or run errands for their family. And so just sort of that added understanding that we're not in our usual environment where we can focus solely on our studies is something important to pay attention to.
For sure. Zoe?
I think everything that everybody here said was right. And that's a hard question, right? What can we do to prepare for something that we couldn't predict and therefore can't prepare for is quite hard. But just everything, flexibility and just prioritizing the welfare of the student and the faculty, right? The people who are interacting with these is just paramount.
Yep. Okay. So I've got one more. It is also expanding on a bit on the Biden administration. So former President Carter played a huge role in creating and supporting citizen-to-citizen relationship between the U.S. and China. What might be some concrete steps that both countries can take to increase student exchanges in the future? Anyone wants to jump in? Eric, would you like to go first?
Sure. I think that the number one thing is to, as we discussed, provide convenient travel arrangements, visa issues, and status issues, right? Because as F1 students, we have to constantly worry about our status, whatever we do or whatever, when we're picking classes, when we are looking for internships. Every minute we are concerned about our status. We're concerned about visa issues. So that's my biggest hope, is to make it ever so slightly easier for international students to have more choices, instead of being limited to to just have one path without choices.
Iris, what about you?
I
Iris?
think Iris is having connection issues, so
Okay, let's go to Spencer. Spencer, what are your thoughts on that?
And I apologize, I missed the question because I too was having connection issues. Could you just repeat it for me, please?
No worries at all. Okay, former President Carter played a huge role in creating and supporting citizen-to-citizen relationships between the US and China. So what might be some concrete steps that both countries can take to increase student exchanges in the future?
That's a really good question. I think one of perhaps the biggest things is visa access, because although it's not, as an American, I didn't think it was especially challenging to get my visa to study in China. Granted, I think this question is a very one about like U.S. China specifically. So just ensuring that ease from China from U.S. to China rather continues, but for Chinese students to be able to come to the U.S., helping to make that more accessible. And I think another step could possibly be just increasing awareness of China through different media campaigns or other things that I'm not entirely sure of at the moment. But just to have awareness from both sides about, why is this relationship a very important one?
Zoe, what about you?
I think all these ideas are great. Any top-down effort that decreases the level of hostility in the general environment for students to then kind of find those areas of cooperation. I mean, there are going to be inevitable points of tension at the government level moving forward, but spaces like climate change, global health, there are actual spaces for cooperation. So steps that a government can take that then create an environment susceptible and welcoming to students to then make those connections, I think are all positive steps.
So I just want to ask very quickly, all of you, are you optimistic or pessimistic about future US-China relations? Eric?
I am very optimistic because you don't have a choice, right? Like if you want to be pessimistic, then you're looking at a very, very, very tragic series of events for the entire world, for entire human race. So I have to be optimistic. I think everybody has to be optimistic, and everyone has to conduct themselves according to the optimistic goals, right? And that's the only way forward. And I hope that everyone can agree with me and not go the opposite way. Yeah.
I think we have still lost Iris, I believe. Let's go to Zoe. Zoe, what are your thoughts on that?
Thanks. Unfortunately, I don't think I share the same opinion as Eric. I think in the short and medium term, I don't see many trend lines that are particularly positive. But I think that just underscores the fact that there are students who, in spite of those trend lines, are willing to go and do good work and learn good things. So while I don't see positive trend lines in terms of cooperation, I mean, we could define what's good or bad in the relations differently. I think that again, just underscores the importance of the types of things that we're doing.
Spencer?
Yeah, I think in the long term, I am very optimistic about the potential that the relationship has. In the short and medium term, similar to Zoe, it's a little bit more unclear because there has been so much sort of upheaval in the last few years that how there will have to be very concerted efforts taken to sort of put everything sort of back onto the right path towards a direction that is better for everyone.
All right, I want to thank all of you, including Iris. I think we've still lost her. I want to thank all of you for sharing your experiences and coming on this webinar. Matt, do you have anything to add at all?
Only a tremendous
like
thank
to
you
say
to
anything
each of our panelists. Thank you
Yep.
so much. Great perspectives.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for those insights. Now, a global pandemic and diplomatic tensions have brought uncertainty to the future of Chinese and American students studying in the United States and China, respectively. We hope that the new Biden administration and the Chinese government understand that student exchanges have been an important part of U.S. China bilateral relations since 1979, and that the two countries continue to work together to facilitate this important avenue of people-to-people interaction. On behalf of my co-moderator, Matthew Chitwood, I would like to thank you all for your contributions. We look forward to holding more such discussions with young talents like yourself. Thank you and have a good day.